Hi everyone, this is Dr. Bach for J310F, here to talk to you about writing for broadcast. Broadcast writing requires a style very different from the style of writing we use when our words are going to be read. And in the broadcast realms, our words are heard at the speed of sound. But first, I want to talk about radio. Because when writing for radio, the ultimate goal is to create for your listener something called a driveway moment. That's the phrase used by folks who work at National Public Radio or American Public Radio like Ira Glass, who hosts a show called This American Life. I recommend that you download an episode of This American Life in your spare time for an example about how powerful listening to the radio can be. A driveway moment is when you don't want to turn off the radio. In this day of portable music and Wi-Fi, you might think that no one listens to the radio anymore, but it is still a relatively powerful medium. A majority of adults use it all the time in the car. People listen to the radio online, and radio is still one of the best ways to reach people during an emergency because receivers can be low power and lightweight. And so when we think about writing for the ear, there are some basic rules. First off, you want to use shorter sentences. If you find yourself using more than one comma in a sentence, you should probably be writing 2 sentences instead. Writing for radio and television is more conversational. We might use the second person and say the word you when we address the audience, as though they're there in the room with us, because in a way, they are. That's why it's so important to think about when somebody might be listening to your words. If you're speaking live, it's important to consider the time of day. And if you're writing for something that will be taped and played later, you should know when your audience is going to be listening to that broadcast. Finally, when writing for the ear, it's crucial to consider the pronunciation of words and to read your scripts aloud. True story. When I was a broadcast journalist in Iowa, I once read a breaking story on the air about a fire that killed 5,000 pigs. Before the broadcast ended, someone handed me a correction that said the fire killed only 5 sows and pigs. Big difference. What happened there? It was all about bad pronunciation when the story was first dictated over the phone to the wire service. In broadcast news, we talk about using sound bites. Sound bites are basically recorded quotes. You also want to record natural sound, like a babbling brook when you're at a campsite, or the sound of people hawking beer and peanuts at a ball game. Whatever is going on in the background helps carry your listener to your location. While you want to be conversational, you also need to be concise. You only have a limited amount of time in broadcast because your stories are tied to a program that lives by the clock. Aim for a friendly but authoritative tone. You're the neighbor next door who knows what's going on. You can also be snappy and use some clever turns of the phrase, but you need to be precise and careful and appropriate in your use of language. Because your sentences have to be short and direct, your vocabulary needs to be precise and descriptive. Some of these rules are a little different if you're writing for a podcast to be downloaded to the web, or you're writing for a video that somebody might view on a website. Online news can be interactive and can be consumed in a user's time. Broadcast news is delivered in real time, usually as a program that has a beginning, middle, and an end. It's tied to the clock, and people come there by appointment. Writing for television requires all of your broadcast writing skills, but it is not simply radio with pictures. Television is still a very popular news medium, and for decades it was number 1 in the way that Americans receive their news. Now it's number 2, just behind the internet, but it is still very popular. Television stories fly by very quickly, and because television requires visuals, story selection is often different. One of the critiques of TV news is that it relies too heavily on fires, car crashes, and crime. Television is very good at certain things because its use of moving images can present emotion very well. Journalists are able to develop a sense of relationship with the audience. Obviously, it's not a real relationship, but it is a very human. Television can cover events live and show us things. Stories with elements that move require elements that demonstrate things or have human beings experience emotion work very well on television. Television falls short in conveying stories with a lot of abstractions, in contextualizing issues, or in providing in-depth coverage. Television also does not always explain things as well as it should, because it moves on very quickly within a broadcast. When you're writing for broadcast, use a friendly, conversational tone. Don't use the inverted pyramid style. It's important to get people's attention first. Use present tense whenever possible, and know that contractions are okay. When you're doing an interview, for television. Be sure to listen and think about the background of the person who you're talking to. Maintain eye contact with the person you're interviewing. Don't be afraid to rephrase a question or re-ask it if necessary. Avoid stepping on sound bites. This takes some practice, but take the microphone from your mouth, put it toward them, let them finish, then ask your next question. This will make editing a lot easier. And finally, don't forget to shoot cutaways and B-roll. This is what a video story might look like when you script it for a TV station. The different colors of text here mark different kinds of visual cues. Television stations use software to help them edit their pieces. For instance, there's an SOT or a VO in here. That means voiceover. When you're writing to video, you need to know what kind of video you've actually filmed and have brought back to your newsroom. Look at it before you write. As you're putting your script together, try to touch the video often. That is, actually mention something that the audience is going to see. Use the most essential facts and be sure to get people's attention at the start of your story and then go on with the explanation. If you have a chance to do live shots, be sure to listen to the introduction that you get from the studio. You don't want to repeat exactly what the anchor just said. You want to explain your surroundings and why you're live in that location. Make the most of the fact that you're live. TV is, of course, a visual medium, and you want to be sure that you talk into the camera and treat it like a guest. Think about what the viewers can see all the time. And yes, your appearance does matter. And you need to use a more intimate tone. You are in their home. As you go out to get your interviews for a story, consider how you cast the characters or the people who will be participating. Your story should reflect your community. Do not always interview the same people or the same type of person. That means you're going to have to sometimes get out of your comfort zone. Don't just think about gender, age, and racial diversity. Think about income diversity as well. Keep your stories simple. Only keep the facts that are necessary. The audience can't keep track of too many things when they're listening at the speed of sound. You want to round off your numbers, and you want to help the anchor be able to read it out loud. Make what you write meaningful. The writing style is a little bit different when it comes to attribution. Attribution should always go first in a broadcast story. You want to make sure that you pronounce people's names absolutely correctly all of the time. And triple check what's in your lower thirds, those portions of the screen that write out a person's name. It's your responsibility to make sure that those names are spelled correctly. Yes, appearance and voice do matter, but people in broadcasting are thinking performers. They're not puppets. They write their own scripts. They are always on, even when they're off the air. So think about how you act in public. Their work on social media is important. If you have a social media account and you work for a broadcast entity, think of yourself as always on. When you're live, you need to be able to think on your feet without profanity. And as you go along with your career, you want to think about yourself in terms of being a Swiss Army knife. Who's getting the jobs these days? Well, they're people who are able to use whatever tool is appropriate to the story. Think of yourself as a Swiss Army knife. Journalists who are getting jobs can shoot video, create a podcast, write a broadcast story, or a 600-word text story for the website. It's all about knowing the best way to help the audience understand what is happening in order to become a fully engaged citizen.